How much do you think about your own actions? Do you consider the ramifications? How much they'll affect the people around you, your family, your friends, your coworkers, random people you meet every day, people you'll probably never meet, the entire world? Because as much as it's kind of hard, that does all come into play at some point, and that's a point that I think the 40th anniversary Super Sentai series, Dobutsu Sentai Zyuohger, or Animal Pack Beast King Ranger, to be a little more literal, is trying to make. Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm the Vacuuminator, a YouTube guy who goes out into the forest after a light morning rain to rant about Japanese children's shows and the plastic collectibles that go with them sometimes. So if you're like that, if you're interested in that, and if you're enjoying this video so far, please do me a favor, do the YouTube algorithm things, engage, hit like on this video, comment down below with some responses to my thoughts on Zyuohger or just your own general thoughts on it, subscribe, ring that bell for more. And as a special little extra thing this week, I want to let you all know that if you're at all looking forward to Hasbro PulseCon, the premier event in Hasbro's streaming toy reveals calendar that is coming up this Friday as of this video's recording and posting, please consider going and subscribing to my group channel at Modular Media here on YouTube, because Friday at 10:30 a.m. we are going to be doing a watch-along for the entire PulseCon event, giving live reactions. It's going to be myself, Boingo Writer, Tim Shields of Zaya Enterprise America, and Wasp Ranger, aka It's Only Magic, here on YouTube. We're going to be getting on for about as much of the event as we can, which will probably be like 4 or 5 hours, just, being a bunch of white guys screaming on the internet about plastic collectibles. So if that sounds like your kind of thing and you don't really have anybody to watch PulseCon with, consider watching it with us. But for now, that's all the plugging and tugging I gotta do. We'll do some more later in the video, but right now, let's talk about Zyuohger, because I feel this is a video that's actually really overdue. It's a video I've wanted to do for years since the series wrapped up, but there's this thing that happens when you're a YouTuber, when one of your videos gets really successful, where you realize you have two choices before you. You can either lean into that and do more videos in that vein on that topic and get easy success, or you can give your channel a more diverse profile that allows you to do whatever you want and still be marginally successful. And back in the day when I did my Gokaiger analysis, even though I love that show, I still consider it to be my favorite show of all time to this day. At the time, doing it and then immediately afterwards, or at least somewhat soon afterwards, doing Power Rangers Megaforce Sucks, I was like, I should probably avoid talking about Power Rangers and Super Sentai, especially anniversary seasons, for a while, so that I don't get pigeonholed. And that meant that certain shows I just didn't feel comfortable covering for a long time. Certain Sentai seasons, like Tokusatsu, which I recently did a video on, and like Zyuohger, which I'm here doing a video on now, and of course there's whatever the hell Power Rangers has been up to since Megaforce, but I've just not been doing a video on that stuff all this time because, well, I didn't want to get stuck in a certain rut in the algorithm. But hey, the great thing about doing videos every week this year is I've kind of realized I am stuck in a few algorithm ruts. I can only really talk about Transformers toys and Tokusatsu, and that's the stuff the YouTube algorithm responds to, which, not the best thing ever, but I do still like those things. So, hey, I did the Tokusatsu video. I'm trying to do a Transformers video every couple of months when something new I have something to say about gets into my hands, and here I am doing this Zyuohger video because, yeah, Zyuohger is a fantastic show, if you didn't know. It takes a really good tact, I think, in avoiding direct comparisons to Gokaiger as the last anniversary series before it, and not really doing a lot of overt, flashy, aesthetically anniversary-oriented things. It's more so in the characters and the content of the story and the kind of stories they tell episode to episode that Zyuohger feels like an anniversary show. It feels like it is doing something that harkens back to the core ideas of Super Sentai, of just very friendly, altruistic heroes all spending a lot of time together, getting to know each other, and occasionally hanging out with a bunch of little Hiroshis. And lest we forget, lest we retcon our own Western Tokusatsu fandom history, that wasn't exactly well received at first. A lot of people, when the initial suits and mecha designs for Zyuohger got revealed, said, oh, this looks like a really kiddie season. Look how simplistic these suits are. Look at those goofy screen printed on animal graphics. Why do all of the Zords turn into cubes? What's with the cube aesthetic? This looks like Minecraft. Minecraft's for little kids. I don't watch little kid shows. I'm a grown adult who watches the cooler, more mature Japanese version of Power Rangers. And those people were very quickly shut up by the fact that Zyuohger's just a well-written show. Within the first episode, you already get a really good lay of the land and an idea of what the main 5 characters are going to be like. It's a little quick, it's a little exposition heavy, it does have some first episode syndrome to it, but it's still a really good opener, giving you a full idea of, okay, Yamato, our Red Ranger, he is a guy with a bit of a mysterious past, probably some baggage of some sort, but he's going to be our main character. He's going to be a good boy who wants to do good things, and because of that, when these weird interdimensional furries show up with superpowers to try and stop this alien invasion that's going on, he's going to befriend them and work with them, and oh, he has powers like them. Where'd he get that? We want to know that. Also, what's the deal with the aliens? What's the deal with the weird furry dimension? How are we going to get back to the weird furry dimension? Because in the first fight, the portal is destroyed, and now all the furry rangers have to live with the human ranger. It's a very fun and dynamic premise that sets up a lot of storytelling opportunity, and I feel like Zyuohger's writers really did a fantastic job of capitalizing on it, because while there are some very story-heavy episodes, Zyuohger rarely falls into the pit hole of just feeling like, oh, we've got a lot of lore to deal with, so this episode is going to be purely about the plot. Everything almost always feels like it's coming from a character place. A lot of the character-focused episodes are really fun and add something extra to the story by building on the relationships between all the characters. Of course, Yamato's budding friendship with all the different Jewland residents and their relationships with each other, and it all feels really natural and fun, and all of the characters are likable to a certain degree. I also feel like the series deserves special attention just for avoiding the pit hole of having the red leader guy be the main character and then having him overshadow everyone. That never really happens. Well, Yamato is very much the main character. A lot of the plot developments do center around him. It never feels like we're shoving other characters to the side to give him the spotlight like some other Sentais of the time I could name. And it makes him all the more likable that he is just a really good, really nice guy with a bit of a rough past that no one goes out of their way to say, like, oh, he's the best, that's why he's our leader. It's just the Juman will occasionally say, oh, we appreciate Yamato for being so good to us, and we want to pay him back, or we have to do this because Yamato says it's the right thing to do, and this isn't our dimension, we don't know what's going on here, we gotta pitch in because he's the only anchor we have. Well, him and his goofy artist uncle, but that guy's mainly there for comedy relief, though he is a fun character. The only time I think Zyuohger really has an issue with focusing too much on a character is something that happens in almost every Super Sentai after a certain point, the introduction of the sixth additional Ranger. Mondo Misao, aka Juo the World, gets an inordinate amount of focus episodes after he initially shows up and is turned good because, well, same reason it always happens. He's a shiny new character with a bunch of new toys to sell, and also he hasn't been in the show up until this point. He hasn't had as much time to get focus episodes as the other characters, so he has to catch up real quick before everybody can be on equal footing. And even though they do that, Mondo is still a fun and engaging character that I really like. He adds a nice extra layer to the Zyuohger dynamic, because all the Zyuohgers are friends by circumstance. Oh, we all have these similar powers and we have to defend this thing. Also, some of us came from an alternate world and we're getting helped out by this one just kind of altruistic good boy. And now here comes this awkward, weird, kind of autistically coded guy who has never had friends before, and he's just figuring out what that's like through meeting the Zyuohgers, and he also has a fair amount of PTSD and mental baggage from having been a brainwashed bad guy just a few episodes ago. It makes for a really interesting character that I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like him in Super Sentai before or since. Certainly, we've had evil Rangers, but we don't always get a lot of focus on them dealing with the fact that they were evil once they're turned good, and we almost never get characters who have that sort of, what I said, autistic coding to them that makes it hard for them to relate with the others and makes their focus episodes very off kilter from what we had gotten in the series up till that point. Certainly sometimes there's friction between the new guy and one or two of the pre-established characters, but it's never been to such a degree. And I do want to commend the writing staff for making Mondo's autistic coding feel a lot more real and fleshed out than I would expect from a Japanese kid show, because while it is played for comedy sometimes, it's not a crutch the show falls on for comedy. They only do that when it makes sense to do that, and he still has big triumphant moments. He still has subtle moments of learning things. He feels like a fully well-rounded and fleshed out character. And while I've got the full cast laid out here, I do want to take a minute to also give special commendation to the directing in this show. This was the first time one of my favorite directors in all of Tokusatsu, Takayuki Shibakashi, got the lead director position on either of the two big Toei shows, and you can really tell he's trying to prove himself here. There's some really sharp and dynamic camera angles and cut all throughout the fights in these. They always use the environment they're in a really interesting way, and this was right around the time Sentai and Toei in general started testing out several new filming techniques that were becoming standard at the time, like GoPros and drone footage, and it all blends together in a really unique and interesting to watch way, which you can't always say for Tokusatsu. As much as we like to talk about, oh yeah, the fights are why you come to it, and you want to see all these cool superheroes moving around in these dynamic ways that people are actually doing, some shows these days don't quite have the panache that Zyuohger has. So to see that implemented there for, again, the 40th anniversary Super Sentai series is really nice, and it keeps you engaged all throughout the episode, not just when character stuff is happening. Now, everything I've talked about up until this point has been fairly spoiler-free, and that's for good reason. You see, if you haven't seen Zyuohger yet, and you've been watching this video just kinda listening in the background, or just trying to get a good feel for it, see if it's something you would like, I would recommend actually stopping the video now and going and watching it, because what I'm about to talk about next is gonna be fairly spoiler heavy. It's going to harken back to that original idea I proposed at the beginning of the video, because I didn't actually get that take until I finished Zyuohger. So in order to talk about it, I got to talk about spoilers. So you have until the next jump cut to get out of here if you want to. And oh gosh, aren't I being nice for even giving you that, because I don't usually give that in videos, but this is a good show, so I want you to go watch it. One criticism I always see lobbed at Zyuohger is the idea that the villains, the Deaf Galians, don't exactly have a really concrete connection to what's going on with our heroes thematically. They're just kind of a random bunch of alien fuckers that show up and start making a problem for the world that causes a need for the Zyuohgers, and that even carries on into Mega Beast Hunter Bunglei, who shows up looking for what ends up being one of their mechas, and his whole motivation after that point is just, oh, I don't like this red guy, I want to fuck with this red guy. And I guess that's a fair criticism if you aren't really thinking about things thematically, but here's the thing about the Deaf Galians. They're an invasive species. This whole show, the main aesthetic theme, the main marketed theme is animals. So you introduce this group of aliens gobbled together from a bunch of different races who are literally just there to play a game to see who can cause the most destruction and who can please their master the most. And suddenly you have a really interesting contrast to the Zyuohgers right off the bat, where they are very much about preserving life, about all life being sacred. We each represent a different sect of the animal kingdom. We each want to keep this earth and its people and its creatures protected, because a thing human beings tend to forget is, even though we're on top of the food chain, even though we're significantly more intelligent in certain ways than most creatures on this planet, we are still a part of this planet. We are still animals ourselves. Just because we walk on 2 feet and wear clothes and talk about our favorite pieces of entertainment on an interconnected computer network we made, and we have indoor plumbing and all this shit, we're still animals. We're just more evolved than all the other animals on this planet. All life is connected, and to defend one type of life on this planet is to defend all of it. That's why you see a lot of liberalistic ideas in superhero media, especially in the West these days, because a superhero who's just fighting for one sect of people isn't all that interesting. Certainly you can have superheroes with certain national affiliations, fictional or real, but at the end of the day, that person, because it's made by those people, has to have good altruistic ideas at their core, which would mean they'd want to fight injustice anywhere it was happening to anyone or anything. Whether it be a human living in their home country or a dog halfway across the world. As long as that creature is innocent to a certain extent, it deserves defending. And the Deaf Galians stand in opposition to that, because they're treating our whole planet as a playground. They're trivializing our lives by just running rampant on everything. And they're not even considering the consequences their actions will have for our planet or the cosmos as a whole when they just go and start wrecking shit. And that's where Yamato comes in as the main character of the show and as the leader of the Zyuohgers, because, well, all the Zyuohgers themselves are interesting and do add to or do different things with this core theme, Yamato is really the mouthpiece of the writers, constantly spouting the line, don't mess with this planet, don't trivialize or interfere in things that you don't know what the full ramifications of your effects will be. And he is constantly fighting for the sacredness of life and the understanding that there has to be between people and each other and the other creatures on this planet. And that all comes to a head and even gets flipped on its head in an interesting way in the final arc of the show, where we finally learn Yamato's backstory, because it's been hinted at in the show all up until this point, with the ever-present question of how can he become a Zyuohger if he's not from Jewland? Oh, he met a Jewman when he was a kid and he was injured, and that Jewman gave him some of his power in order to survive. But who was that Jewman? How could we meet him again? Oh, well, it turns out that Jewman is a renegade who left Jewland because he didn't agree with some shit he found out that Jewland's government was up to and covering up. Mainly killing any humans that happened to stumble through the portal. Jewland was keeping themselves a secret because, as we learn in the big 2000th episode of Super Sentai, where we find out the true backstory of the Zyuohgers, that the first Zyuohger was a whale Jewman that lived on our version of Earth, because our version of Earth and Jewland's version of Earth were one and the same thousands of years ago. He defended the Earth with his whale cube because it was under attack from a great cosmic entity, and that caused the Zyuohger powers to become a thing. But also, because of certain stuff that happened back then, Jewmen became afraid of humans and what they might do, because they saw that we were evolving along similar tracks, and so they chose to use the power of the Zyuo cubes to separate into two different dimensions, to give themselves their own version of Earth separate from ours. But the consequences of that is, well, on our world, humans developed to be what they are in reality. All the other animals of the Earth stayed as they were. They never evolved to a point of gaining sentience or developing a society. But the few humans who had and went into their own world, their society didn't evolve as strongly as ours was. It was still somewhat primitive and tribal, and you can see that in the brief glimpses we get of Jewland. It looks like a sort of underdeveloped country with only small marketplaces and huts for people to live in. And so when the Jewman Yamato met as a kid, a eagle Jewman named Bard, learned all this, he decided to leave because he knew he couldn't fix it as just one person, so it would be better to go and try and live in the human world. Until he was injured just trying to survive and had to go to a human for help. That human happened to be Yamato's father, who then, because he was helping Bard, because no one else would, Bard was a weird frickin' eagle monster man, yet if he was asking for help, nobody else was going to do it, or if they did it, he would probably end up in a government facility somewhere. But because Yamato's dad chose to help him, he missed the death of his wife, and Yamato blamed him for that, because she had been sick in bed for months leading up to that. They knew it was coming, and yet he was still continuing to work. He was putting work before his family, and Yamato hated him for it. He tried to run away from home, got caught up in a storm, and oh shit, that's when he met the Eagle Jewman. The Eagle Jewman who couldn't have been there to help him if his dad hadn't healed him, because that's the way the world works. Yamato didn't know these things, so he couldn't have acted on them until later in life. But when he learns it, it kind of throws his whole worldview into question, and then suddenly strengthens it, because he realizes this just means I was right all along. All life on our planet is connected. Everything we do has an effect that we will never even see the full ramifications of. If Bard hadn't gone to my dad for help, my dad never would have missed my mom's death, but he also wouldn't have helped Bard, which means Bard wouldn't have been there to help me a few hours later, and so on and so it goes. So the cycle continues until Yamato decides to break it by stopping the Death Galians from destroying the Earth, and then using the Juo cubes with the rest of the Juman to merge the two Earths together, to force these two societies to try and find a way to get along. And of course, we never see the full ramifications of that. I believe the V Cinema just entirely ignored it in order to do something fun and wacky, but it is a very interesting statement about the world we live in and about the ideals heroes stand for that are at the core of Super Sentai. If you're going to protect someone, you have to protect everyone. And you can't let certain people shut themselves off from each other, because that's simply just never going to work. No matter what you do, your actions are always going to have consequences. Even though the Juman went and hid in an alternate dimension, humans still stumbled through the portal every once in a while. And because they were scared and just trying to defend themselves, that led them to friggin' trying to kill the humans that came through, because they had no other recourse. They had no way to erase their memory or anything. They figured, all right, either the secret's out or this person's got to die. And because the secret getting out could mean that all of our people get eradicated, we got to kill this one guy. And that just kept happening every few years until finally Yamato, Bard, Larry, who I haven't even mentioned up until now but is great, and all the other Jumans say enough is enough. We're merging the two worlds back together, and we're going to figure out a way to make things work. Misao and Larry even go into politics together to try and forge an alliance between the two species. Or that's an interesting question I never considered up until this point. Are the Juman all one species, or are they technically different species, or is it like a subspecies thing because they're all called Juman, but they're all like different types of Juman that relate to animals on our Earth? And man, how is that going to work with Juman living alongside the unevolved ancestors on our Earth? It's all very interesting. And I would love to see all of that delved into a bit more in like a Zyuohger 10 years after or something. But as is, I think it's still a really strong show that does a lot of great stuff to make its point. There's tons of really interesting layered storytelling going on in Zyuohger. It does feel like a worthy successor to Gokaiger writing-wise. I enjoy it just as much as that show, and I really hope it gets a similar anniversary treatment when the time comes around. And if that ever happens, you can always hear my thoughts over on my weekly Tokusatsu podcast that I do on YouTube at Modular Media with Buster Corp, because we're always talking about the latest Toei and Tsuburaya releases there. But I've never gotten a chance to speak on this show because we started that podcast well after this show ended, and I've not been able to rewatch it until I made myself sit down and rewatch a bunch of episodes for this video to remember just how good Zyuohger is. That it truly is one of my favorite Super Sentai, one of my favorite Tokusatsu ever made, and I really think it's worth your time. Even if you look at the suits and go, those are kind of goofy, those are kind of cheesy, trust me, the show takes it in stride, makes it work for itself, and the writing is so strong that you don't even think about it half the time. And plus, it's also just got one of the most kicking Super Sentai themes I've ever heard. That the Zyuohger theme straight up bops. I love it. It's actually, you know what, I'll say this, it does have this over Gokaiger. Zyuohger has a better opening theme song. I genuinely believe that. If you can't listen to that fucking eagle, shark, tiger, instincts awaken chant and not get pumped up, there's something wrong with you. So if you have seen Zyuohger and you've enjoyed me singing its praises, please do all the YouTube things, like, comment down below with some of your thoughts, subscribe, ring that bell in order to enable notifications, and be alerted of every time I release a future video, because it might be on another Sentai you like or something like that. Go ahead and pledge to my Patreon if you've been around for a minute. Just $1 a month gets you videos early, gets your name in the credits, gets access to a monthly behind-the-scenes podcast, and if you haven't seen Zyuohger, what are you waiting for, man? I have told you repeatedly throughout this video why the show is fantastic and worth your time, why you need to go seek it out, even if you gotta do some, special methods to find a good fan sub. So, go do that. Go learn about these great characters and these fun action scenes and all the great stuff that Zyuohger has to offer. And remember, you never fail until you stop trying. So don't stop believing in the fact that everything is connected and everything you do deserves that kind of thought put behind it. And don't ever forget that you don't mess with this planet. Until next time.